Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of this top 10? Top 10 bands. Well, these are my top 10 favorite bands. Now normally I mostly cover pro wrestling, but every now and again I like to give a little glimpse into other things that I enjoy. I've done videos on cartoons that I love, I've done videos on sitcoms that I love, so I wanted to kind of give one on what probably, other than wrestling and Philadelphia sports, is one of my biggest loves, and that's music. I'm a person that has a Spotify list with almost 3,000 songs on it because I love so much different music and so many different songs that everything I think of, I just keep adding it to the list and I just play it at random. So this is my 10 favorite bands. Now for this, I know a lot of people have different ideas of what a band is. I'm considering basically a group of people. Doesn't matter what genre. They could be rap, they could be hard rock, they could be classic rock, and everything in between that. With that being said, let's jump right into the top 10 with our number 10, Killswitch Engage. Killswitch Engage is one of those bands that really came around at the perfect time for me. I was kind of looking for something new, something different, something to latch on to, and then I heard Killswitch. And they had what is basically a bridge between heavy metal and hardcore music, which has been done before that and definitely has been done since. I like all the iterations of the band, either with Jesse as a singer or Howard as a singer. I personally prefer Howard. I know I'm in the minority. Most people I talk to about Killswitch Engage like Jesse better, which is cool. I love Jesse's music as well. I think they're both great. I just like Howard's voice a little better, in my opinion. Just a fantastic band. Definitely one of my favorites. That's why they're on my list. Now coming from that, our number 9. Fittingly, they're number 9. They got 9 members deep, Slipknot. If I was doing a list of my top 10 albums, Slipknot's second album, Iowa, would be in deep contention for the number 1 spot, in my opinion. And that's not to say that their other albums aren't great. Volume 3 is awesome. Their self-titled album is awesome. They put out a lot of really great music, and Iowa to me is unrelenting, almost towing the line of death metal at some points. It's just brutal aggression, and it came out in a time where I already liked Slipknot. I liked them since the initial Slipknot album, or the initial one that I heard, because there are other albums that came out before the self-titled album. But this really came out to a time when I was really angry with the world, and my mother had just passed away. And then I get this album that's filled with anger, filled with rage, and it kind of fit, and it made me enjoy the album. It made me really connect with Slipknot, and I've been a fan ever since. And Corey Taylor, one of the great singers of all music. I mean, the guy can literally sing any style and make it sound good. His other band, Stone Sour, sounds amazing. His solo stuff is mostly really good. They're just a fantastic band, and the whole concept of Slipknot, the jumpsuits, the masks, everything about it's just really cool, hence why they're on my list. Now going from that, our number 8. Probably a band that Slipknot would say was a little bit of an influence for him, or not a major influence to him, and that's Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine is quote-unquote new metal, and so Slipknot a bit. I know Slipknot gets looped into the new metal, but I don't think Slipknot is, and I really don't think Rage Against the Machine is either. I think Rage set the template for a lot of bands that would be considered new metal. But here was this band that came out of nowhere that basically infused rock music and rap elements and almost a spoken word poetry elements. This was like if Parliament Funkadelic, Public Enemy, and Anthrax all got together and had a child with each other, it would make Rage Against the Machine. I mean, just some of the great music of the 1990s, and you will see a lot of these bands are very 90s centric. That's when I was a teenager. Most people, you'll find their musical tastes usually go to that age range. They're so iconic and such a great band. I loved everything they did. I keep wishing for them to make a new album. I know they tour every now and again, but I'd love to hear one last Rage Against the Machine album. I think they would be really great. I'll go from that, our number 7. Another band that was probably at their height in the 1990s, Rancid. Rancid came out of the ashes of Operation Ivy. Obviously, there's members that were in both bands, and they kind of took that ska punk sound and made it something different. I absolutely love the sound of Rancid. It has this quality of being punk and being raw and distorted, while also sounding really pop and having a pop sensibility to it. And it just feels like the kind of music you want to sit down and listen to while you're having a couple of beers with a friend, or playing video games, or just having fun. It's just great, fun music, in my opinion. And I know they do talk about some serious stuff in their music. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're just a fun band. They're a really amazing band. I love Rancid. Probably one of the bands that really kept my interest in the punk genre when there were a lot of bands that were just basically Misfits or Black Flag clones or even Minor Threat clones. Rancid did something different and kept interest in the whole genre for me, because I wanted to hear what Rancid did, and I wanted to hear what other bands like Pennywise and NoFX did, and that all came from Rancid. Just an amazing band. That's why they're on my list. I love Rancid. And hey, shout out to the band, because we know they love pro wrestling. We know that Ruby Soho, the wrestler, uses their song, uses her name from that. They've been involved in her entrance. Fantastic band. I love Rancid. Now going from that, our number 6, A Tribe Called Quest. A Tribe Called Quest really was one of the first rap bands that infused that jazz sound and really kind of took it on an artistic level in a different way that rap ever went before them. And a lot of people copied after them. They were a band that me and my best friend Aaron, we used to listen to back and forth and all day and night. We memorized all the words. We used to sing it with each other walking down the street. And yeah, it's weird. It's one of those things that even when they come up today, if I hear them on the radio or they play on one of my playlists, I'll take a screenshot or I'll take a video of listening to it and I'll send it to them, and it kind of has that connection there. Artistically, they're one of the great rap groups of all time. One of the most influential rap groups of all time. Just an amazing group, and if you aren't someone that really likes rap music, I still think you could get into Tribe Called Quest because they're just that good. They're just a great group, and they really changed the game, and they really set their own mark on it. I loved everything they did. Rest in peace, Fife. What an amazing band. Now going from that, our number 5. One of the bands that actually collaborated with Tribe Called Quest, or at least Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest, the Beastie Boys. Myself, much like most people of my age, first learned of the Beastie Boys with their License to Ill album, which was basically a frat rap, party rap kind of album, and we all instantly loved it. I mean, we love Brass Monkey, we love Fight for Your Right to Party, Paul Revere, all that stuff. Then a couple years go by and they come back out and they give us Paul's Boutique, which commercially was a bit of a failure, but critically and sonically, it really pushed forward sampling. And I know a lot of people don't like sampling, and I get it if you're one of those people, but this really pushed sampling into an art form with such a different take than what we had on their first album. They really evolved. And then as I grew up a bit, because when License to Ill came out, I was about 8 years old. When Paul's Boutique came out, I was about 12. And then I started knowing, then I really found out about their back catalog. And that kind of came more to head when they put out Check Your Head, that I found out that they used to be a hardcore punk band too. And I found some of their hardcore punk stuff. They're one of the groups that really did what they wanted to do, whether it be adding punk into rap music, which I've always said, and I tell this to people all the time, punk rock and rap are two children from the same father. They're born of the same struggles, they're born of the same concerns, they're born of the same ideologies. Do it yourself, pull yourself up, make art any way you can. And here was the Beastie Boys combining that and really becoming one of the first rap bands or rap groups, them and Run DMC, to really hit the mainstream and really break rap open. I mean, rap and hip hop now is ubiquitous. It's pop music. If you look at the top 10 singles, top 10 albums, whatever, there's probably at least 4 or 5 rap groups on there right now, or rap artists. In the time of the Beastie Boys, it was just them. Or it was just them and Run DMC. They paved the way for so many people that came after them, not only in rap, but also in punk rock, in electric music, in experimental music. You'd be hard-pressed to find bands that didn't come out after the Beastie Boys that didn't take some influence from the Beastie Boys. Whether it was a kid that just listened to rap and heard a Led Zeppelin sample on one of their songs and went back to listen to Led Zeppelin and found out they love Led Zeppelin, or vice versa, a Led Zeppelin fan that heard that sample on a Beastie Boys song and started exploring more rap and found out they like a lot of rap. They're such a great band. Even as highly as people put them and as critically acclaimed as they are, they're probably still a bit underrated in my opinion. Just amazing. I love the Beastie Boys. Rest in peace, MCA. You guys are amazing. Now going from that, our number 4. Probably the oldest band you're going to hear me talk about here, and that's Queen. I don't know if you're a music fan if you don't like Queen and you don't like Freddie Mercury. To me, Freddie is one of the 2 best voices in all of music history, and the other one we're going to talk about a little later. I'd be willing to hear an argument that he is the number 1 voice in all of the history of music. They're so iconic, and so many generations of people have grown up listening to Queen from the early 70s all the way to now. There's kids that are teenagers now that are getting into Queen either from hearing their music in the Suicide Squad movie or seeing the movie about Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, and then going, wow, this stuff is amazing, because it really is. I mean, you got a transcendent singer, one of the biggest icons in all of music history. Fantastic band. Their Live Aid performance might be the best live performance in the history of any live music anywhere. Just an amazing band. I love Queen. Once again, rest in peace, Freddie Mercury. I know we've done this on a couple of these already. What a fantastic band. I love Queen. Now going from that, our number 3. We had a band of 9 rock musicians earlier. Now we have 9 rappers from the slums of Shaolin. The RZA, the Jizza, Old Dirty Bastard, Inspector Deck, Raekwon the Chef, Ghostface Killer, Method Man, You God, Inspector Deck, Master Killer, and I probably said somebody twice, the WuTang Clan. WuTang Clan is literally what they say they are. WuTang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. They came into rap and basically took it over. They forced their way in. It was almost like a forcible entry or a home invasion of music. They just barraged you with 9 of the best rappers in the world. I mean, the worst member of the WuTang Clan is the best rapper in most other rap groups. There's legendary rappers in the WuTang Clan that are basically on 1 or 2 songs on all their albums. I mean, You God is an amazing rapper. Inspector Deck is amazing. Just think of how great they are and how big their influence is. Everyone from Old Dirty Bastard, Method Man, who's arguably one of the greatest rappers of all time, RZA, one of the great producers of all time, the Jizza, whose Liquid Swords album, again, would be one of my top albums ever. Also, Enter the 36 Chambers, obviously, would be one of my top rap albums ever, or top albums ever. Sonically, they were different than anything else before them and laid their fingerprints on everything else after them, so much so that I've even seen a Red Hot Chili Peppers interview where they said that their bass line was stolen from the Wu-Tang Clan. Just a fantastic group. I love Wu-Tang. Again, Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. Now going from the Wu to our number 2, Cypress Hill. Now, a lot of you people may know Cypress Hill as a one-hit wonder with Insane in the Brain, which is an absolutely stellar song. It's obviously their biggest hit. You may know them for Rock Superstar, which was another massive hit. I was a fan since very early on. I was so much of a fan that before they had t-shirts out for Cypress Hill, I went to, I think it was Fashion Bug was the store. It was kind of a somewhat women's clothing store, but they had men's clothes too. They were in a shopping center right near my house. That's why I went there. And they had fabric paint, and they also had t-shirts. I made my own Cypress Hill shirt before Cypress Hill had a shirt. And that's off of their first album, which is self-titled Cypress Hill. They took kind of what the Beastie Boys did and added their own flavor, mixed in a Latin influence with Latin drum beats, Latin language, gave us a whole new style, whole different take on what rap was. And a lot of people know them as basically the weed rappers, which, yeah, they got a ton of songs about weed. I'm not gonna lie about that. And when I initially found them, I was a big fan of weed. I don't partake in that anymore. However, I'm not against it. If you're for that, good for you. If you're not, I understand. Just an amazing, amazing group. Again, another one of those genre-bending, genre-changing bands. I love them so much so that if you could see here, which I'm probably going to have to take a picture and put it on here, I have the band logo off of their third album and have had it there since I was 18 years old, tattooed on my arm right here. Much like I said with Tribe Called Quest, me and my best friend Aaron and our other friend Brian, who has since passed away, I love you, big man. I miss you very much, just so you know. Me, Aaron, and Brian were basically the three musketeers. You couldn't find two better friends in the world if you invented them. These two guys were basically my brothers, and we would sit there and listen to these Cypress Hill albums back to back. We'd go to the Cypress Hill concerts. We'd buy the Cypress Hill t-shirts, the Cypress Hill posters. If it had Cypress Hill on it, we bought it, whether it be a mug, a pin, a patch, anything of that nature. It's such a great time in my life, and it really makes me think of two of my best friends, and I don't even think friend is a good enough word. Two of my brothers. I just love those guys so much, and I love the connection that we have, and that's one thing that I really like about music is the connections it brings to you and the connections you make through it and what you feel every time you hear it. Every time I hear a song like Hand on the Pump, I think of us being together, listening to it in Aaron's Malibu. Or when the second album, Black Sunday, came out, me and Aaron were in summer school because we were terrible students. And we went straight from summer school to the mall to buy the album so we could listen to it on the way home. Just an amazing, amazing group. If you've only heard Rock Superstar or Insane in the Brain, I say you should probably look at their back catalog, look at all their songs. They have some really great music, especially if you liked Insane in the Brain. I guarantee they've got a lot of other stuff you're going to love just as much. Now, before we get to our number one, we do a thing here on my top 10s called the best of the rest. Normally, I do one or two things that basically were into consideration when I made the list. So basically, to pull the curtains back a bit, when I make my top 10s, I jot down 10 or 12 different things that are going to be on the list, and then I figure out where they fit 1 through 10. And usually there's 2 or 3 left over. Since there's so much music and so many bands that I want to pay respect to, this is going to be way more than 2. I'm not going to give a long-winded example of these. I'm just basically going to give their name, give a short description of them, and move on, because I wanted to add probably about 15 other bands to the list that all were in consideration, and depending on when you talk to me, some of these might fit in my top 10, some of them might be up high on my top 10. This just happens to be the list that I came with today. First up on the best of the rest, 3 6 Mafia. I love 3 6 Mafia. I love the Memphis sound, what they started with it, fantastic rap group, that's why they were considered. Next, the Misfits. I talked about the Misfits a little bit earlier when I talked about Rancid and punk music. The Misfits and their influence and their contributions to music cannot be denied. Next up, AFI, a band that probably took a lot of influence and definitely took a lot of influence from the Misfits, from bands like The Cure, and really carved their own path. Went from being a hardcore punk band to more of an emo style band. Just a fantastic band. I like them a whole lot. I love every one of their evolutions. They continue to make great music. I love AFI, that's why they were considered. Next up, My Chemical Romance, a band that's kind of a contemporary with AFI, kind of that emo 2010s era, Hot Topic punk. In my opinion, they are the best band of that era, of that time frame, of that style. Just sonically great, make great songs. I absolutely love it. Next up, the Migos. Probably the most controversial band or group that I'm going to put on here. A lot of people dislike the Migos and the mumble rap style. I think the Migos are more akin to 3 6 Mafia than quote-unquote mumble rap. They just make catchy songs that I enjoy listening to. I love the Migos. That's why they got a shout out. Next up, Naughty by Nature. You down with OPP? Yeah, you know me. Who doesn't love OPP, Hip Hop Hooray? Great music by a great rap group. Next up, Korn. There's probably 5 other bands that I've named here that Korn's influenced, and Korn's a band that I really, really love, and they were really in consideration to make the top 10. They probably would make it on any different day or a different day. They're one of the bands I've seen live most. I think I've seen them 6, 7 times, somewhere in that range. Just an amazing band. One of the new metal pioneers. I love Korn. Next up, Blink-182. Much like Rancid, much like Misfits, more of a pop take on punk rock and a more polished version of punk. I love Blink-182. I think a lot of their music is really, really good, and they have some of my favorite songs of all time, so I'm shouting them out. Next up, the Deftones. The Deftones to me is a band that's put out amazing albums, but you really don't get how great the Deftones are unless you've seen them live. And when you see them live, you kind of get disappointed that none of their albums really catches that energy that they put out live. And that's not saying that they don't have great albums, because they absolutely do. Sidebar on this, as you can imagine if you've seen my videos, I take a lot of sidebars. The Deftones are the reason that I know that the rainbow is a symbol for gay pride. And the reason I know this is Deftones used to have a t-shirt. It was like a ringer tee, that, you know, the baseball tees that have like the stripe of blue or red here and a red collar. It was a white t-shirt, said Deftones with a rainbow on it. And I was at a concert somewhere, and I don't remember what concert it was or what bands were even playing. It was one of those things like a Lollapalooza or something like that, where there were 50 bands playing that day. And I went with a group of people, and there was this girl that was a friend of a friend, and she goes, "Oh, are you gay?" I'm like, "Huh?" I don't have anything against gay people. I'm personally a straight man, but I was very confused. And she said, "Your shirt." I said, "What do you mean my shirt?" And just to lay more groundwork for this, at the time I probably had neon pink or green or blue hair and may or may not have had my fingernails painted. She goes, "Your shirt, you have the rainbow." Like, I don't get what you're saying. So then she explained to me what the rainbow meant. I never knew until then. I mean, call me ignorant. I didn't stop wearing the shirt. I love the shirt. I have nothing against rainbows. Just a little sidebar story of how I became aware of what rainbows mean to the LGBTQ plus community. Moving on our list, GWAR. GWAR is basically a shock rock band. If you've never heard of GWAR, they're aliens from outer space. They wear amazing costumes, have one of the best live shows ever. They spit blood on the crowd, throw meat into the crowd, which I know sounds weird, but it's amazing when you see it. GWAR's just great. Next up, the Goats. And this is a band that probably 4 or 5 of you may have heard of. The Goats were a rap group from the Northeast Philadelphia area, and they were a lot like Cypress Hill. They were politically inclined, much like Public Enemy was. They were sonically a lot like Cypress Hill, a lot like Public Enemy, bringing in that more rock-inspired rap music, so much so that on their second album they even had live instrumentation. Underrated 90s hip-hop band. If you like 90s hip-hop and you haven't heard the Goats, I recommend go checking them out. Not a lot of people know who they are, but for me, they're great. Next up, probably my favorite electronic band, Daft Punk. Daft Punk just makes good music. I mean, there's no way around it. You can't listen to Daft Punk songs without wanting to dance. They're just that good. I love Daft Punk, hence why they were considered. Next up, staying on the electronic tip, Prodigy. Prodigy was EDM with a punk tinge to it, and if you notice that there's a common vibe going through here where punk rock influences a lot of my influences, I love the Prodigy. That's why they were put on my list. Next up, another band that probably 3 or 4 of you know, Dandelion. Dandelion is another band from Philadelphia. They were kind of at the end of the grunge movement, kind of a post-grunge, almost garage rock, mixed with some 60s psychedelic sound. They're definitely an underrated band. If you like bands like Stone Temple Pilots or Nirvana or Soundgarden, you should probably go and check out Dandelion, because they got some really good music. I believe they only released the two albums, but both their albums are fantastic and very different. The first album is almost all in a grunge, post-grunge vibe, where the second album they incorporated more of the psychedelic stuff in there. Just a fantastic band. Next up, a band I just mentioned, Nirvana. I feel like Nirvana gets overlooked because they've kind of become like the Beatles, where they're just in the lexicon. So much so that you'll see kids today wearing Nirvana shirts that have no clue what Nirvana is or their music. They just seen the shirt in Walmart and like the smiley face. it can't be understated how important to the music business Nirvana is. They're one of probably the 3 or 4 most important bands in the history of music, and they made fantastic music. There's a reason why they're great. Next up, White Zombie. I love White Zombie. I love Rob Zombie. I love the aesthetics. I love the band. Again, you can see the influences of Kiss, Alice Cooper, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, all brought into this band, and just they were amazing. Last but not least, on my best of the rest, and I know I gave you a lot here. If you've been following the list, this is probably the most surprising band on here, Poison. Yep. Poison is my favorite of the hair metal bands, and I kind of feel like hair metal gets a real bad rap about it. Yeah, there were some cheesy hair metal bands, but there were also some cheesy grunge bands, there were some cheesy nu metal bands, there are some cheesy punk bands, there are some cheesy rap bands. Every genre has its corny, cheesy bands. Poison wasn't one of them. Poison put out great music. I mean, Every Rose Has Its Thorn is great, Unskinny Bop is an amazing song, Talk Dirty to Me is just fantastic. The 80s had a lot of great bands. I mean, Motley Crue was amazing, Poison was amazing, Bon Jovi even had some really killer songs, Whitesnake was really great, Rat was great, the later part of the 80s, Guns N' Roses was great. I think Poison was the best of the crew. With all that being said, and me covering half of the bands that ever played music, before I get to my number one, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. And my favorite band of all time, the number one band on the list, Alice in Chains. When I talked about Queen and Freddie Mercury earlier, I talked about Freddie being one of the 2 best vocalists, in my opinion, in all of music history. We've come to the one who I think is either tied with Freddie or they're 1A and 1B, and that's Lane Staley and Alice in Chains. Alice in Chains' music and Lane Staley's voice, and even Will, who's the new singer since they've come back after Lane has passed, their music just speaks to me. There's something about it that resonates through my soul. His voice resonates in my heart. I could feel it. I could feel their music, and it's just such a great band and such great songs. The melodies with Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley, and now Jerry and Will, and for some reason Will's last name is skipping my mind. Sorry, Will, you are an amazing singer, and you had a really tough pair of shoes to fill. The albums with Will are amazing too. Don't get me wrong. This band was so great, and like I said, they just touch me in a way that most other bands don't. And their Unplugged, to me, is one of the greatest musical things of all time. I talked about Queen at Live Aid. Seeing their Unplugged, which is something that I probably go back and watch every 3 months or so, and I listen to songs and the whole album regularly. There's something about that performance that's so raw. The stripped down version of Alice in Chains, and you could feel everything. It resonates, and it's such a great band. They're kind of pushed to the background in the grunge movement. I mean, you have Nirvana and Pearl Jam, which are 2 amazing bands. Don't get me wrong, I love both of them. Even Soundgarden, I love Soundgarden too. But it feels like they overshadow Alice in Chains, but to me, musically, I don't think there's a band that's ever overshadowed Alice in Chains. They are just that great. And if you haven't ever heard Alice in Chains, I implore you to go check out their music. Check out Rooster. Check out Them Bones. Check out Man in the Box, which fittingly is Tommy Dreamer's theme song. And there's a lot of bands on here that have ties to wrestling. Some of it's because ECW stole a lot of real music and used it. Some of it, like Rancid and Ruby Soho, is just the universe working together. Killswitch Engage made a song for CM Punk, which was originally a Randy Orton song. Members of WuTang have done stuff for wrestlers. Cypress Hill did a song for Taz. The Migos. I mean, Ric Flair Drip, it's one of their songs. 3-6 Mafia with Mark Henry. And yes, I understand there's a connection, but it's not why I love these bands. I love a lot of these bands just because they're great. And I know I went off on a tangent there. Back to Alice in Chains, one of the fantastic, fantastic bands that's ever been and probably ever will be. I really love them, and I implore you to check them out if you've never heard them. With all that being said, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, first, thank you. Second, let me know in the comments what your favorite band is. Put it down here. My name is George Coles, and this has been another Top 10.